My name's Suvarnajyoti, and we're just going to start with a little chance to let ourselves really arrive here in the shrine room or wherever you are at home. And now was a good moment, if you haven't turned your phone off, to just mindfully do so. And it's good to have your feet about hips width apart. And if you're finding that you can't balance your knees upwards, you can let them lean in towards each other and prop each other up. Yeah, it's good to have your knees bent up if you can. And if your feet are slipping on the floor, you can just slip the back of your socks off just to stick your feet down, as it were. Okay. Just let Katrine get settled. And just beginning to let yourself come home to yourself. Probably most of us have had busy days, mind all over the place, possibly bodies running here, running there, or sitting in front of a screen all day. And this is just a chance to invite all the different bits of yourself to come together and arrive here in this room. So just noticing what that feels like, what your whole being feels like just now, just getting a sense of that, whatever that might be. And noticing if your mind is tending to run away somewhere, or perhaps the opposite, is getting sluggish and sleepy. And just each time you notice that, just inviting it, inviting your mind, inviting your awareness back and into your whole body. Like you're soothing and smoothing the awareness down through the body. Maybe you can even get a sense of the kind of, perhaps a kind of jagged energy of the day. And here we are, we've got this whole evening together to soften that and smooth that. And just keep coming back with gentleness. Now letting your awareness drop to your points of contact with the earth. And really letting yourself notice the quality of the sensations there. allowing yourself to give your weight up to the earth, to trust that the earth will hold you. We kind of know that logically, but it's another thing to really let that drop deeply into you, to trust the earth and to relax into it in that trust. Wherever your mind goes, just keep bringing it home to the body whenever you notice that it's off somewhere else. Now softening your face. Seeing if you can really just let it go completely relaxed. Nobody's looking at you right now. Softening the brow, the eyes in the sockets, the cheeks and the jaw. And softening the shoulders. See if they can drop down a tiny little bit more towards the earth. Don't force it, but just see what happens if you relax down into them. Noticing the sound as it passes through your awareness. Softening the hands. And softening the legs and feet. Just checking in as to whether there's any tension. Sometimes it can get tension in the thighs when you're lying down like this. Seeing if you can soften that. Let the knees drop towards each other if that helps. now expanding your awareness to include your whole being. All the different senses, including the mind sense, which is the sixth sense. And now just noticing where breathing is showing up for you right now. And just very lightly resting your awareness there. So for the next few moments until I ring the bell, keeping that broad awareness of the whole body, the whole experience. And then with a slightly more attention on breathing. Just coming back to that over and over again. As the sound of the bell fades away, in your own time, rolling over to face the shrine and just lying on your side for a few moments, noticing how that feels to be in that different position. And then whenever you're ready, bringing yourself up to a sitting position or onto a chair if you wish, and just sitting comfortably. We're not going to meditate straight away. Yeah, so just sit comfortably save your knees for later. Right, good. Okay, let's have a little bit more light. I've got to put that one on before. Am I too bright now, Katrine? Is that all right, light-wise? Okay, good. I can actually read what I've written now. Okay, so so we're on to the next week of our, or the next section of this series that we're doing on the 5 spiritual faculties. And so I picked the short straw, and I'm doing the one that I think's probably the most difficult to speak about. So we'll see how we get on. We'll have a chance to explore that together this evening. But I want to start by asking people to just shout out what you think. What do you think is the purpose of Buddhist meditation? Just a short, what do you think? Not a great, that's not a dissertation title, just, like a word or two or a sentence. Anybody going to be brave enough? Paul?
Better human being.
To become a better human being. Okay. Any other offers? Philippa?
The nature of reality.
To explore the nature of reality. Okay. Any other offers? To become enlightened. Okay. Yeah. Any other offers? One more?
To be more self-aware.
To be more self-aware. Okay, great. That's a really great selection of reasons for meditating there. Very good. And what often happens is people come along to meditation. I certainly did. And I came along to meditation because I wanted to sort of become more aware, more happier, a more sort of positive person. And it was only as time went on and I became more involved in the more Buddhist side of meditation, if you like, that I gradually began to get this sense of that although those are very, very positive aims and very positive reasons to meditate, the purpose of meditation within a Buddhist context is to clarify and clarify your mind and make your mind positive enough sufficiently that you can to use the jargon that we can see through a delusion that we are a fixed and separate self, which we're going to explore that through this evening. If that doesn't mean anything to you now, don't worry. And that's in a way, that's another way of saying what Philippa said, to see through to the true nature of reality, which again is another way of saying to become enlightened. So that's what we're going to be exploring this week and next week. We're going to be exploring what that means and the wisdom that is the seeing through to that true nature of reality. That is called Prajna, which is one of the 5 spiritual faculties, and it's the one we're going to be exploring this week and next week. So we're going to ease our way in, hopefully, and we're going to start with a point, with a definition that Suvarnajyoti, who was the founder of this Buddhist movement, he once gave a one-word definition of Buddhism. I don't know if anybody knows. Does anybody know what Suvarnajyoti said when he was asked, how would you sum Buddhism up in one word?
Truth.
He could have said truth. He didn't say truth. No. Okay. I'll put you out your misery. He said impermanence. So impermanence is one of those, like many aspects of Buddhist teaching, where it sort of seems like it's like dead obvious and really quite simple, because like we all kind of know that, nobody lives forever, nothing lasts forever, things are constantly sort of coming into being and then, disappearing. And we sort of know that on a logical level. But to what extent do we really, really live from that truth? To what extent do we really live our lives that way? To what extent do we really believe that in the same way that we believe in gravity, as it were? Assuming that you're not trying to end your own life, you would never step off a cliff. You just wouldn't do it, because you trust enough in gravity to know what the outcome would be. But when it comes to this impermanence, in a way, gravity, we can see the results of that instantly. And in a way that sort of makes it easier to kind of believe in that, or to sort of live by that. Whereas with impermanence, somehow or another, we have this way of being able to kind of be in denial about it, even whilst we sort of logically know it's true. And another of Sangharakshita's famous sort of aphorisms was that, that spiritual progress is about finding the emotional equivalence to our intellectual understanding. So we can understand lots of things on an intellectual level, like the idea that everything's impermanent. How do we find an emotional equivalence of that? Because so much of the suffering that we go through is because we don't really, we don't really want things to be impermanent. So we sort of fight against that, even whilst at the same time logically knowing it's true. So it's just like this sort of weird self-denial that we all do. And sometimes it can be in small ways. And our relationship to death is a sort of quite an obvious one, really. I remember many years ago I was working in the health service, and I was working in a service for older people, and I was working with this couple, and they were in their very late 80s, and they were both very, very poorly, very physically unwell. And then the husband died. They'd been together 60 years. They'd raised their children. They'd always been together. They're both in their 80s, both very poorly, and the husband died. And I remember the wife saying to me, with this just look of shock on her face, she just kept saying, I never thought he'd die. I just never thought he'd die. Like, I don't know how to balance a checkbook. I don't know how to pay the bills. All of this kind of thing. And, there was a part of me thinking, but, you've both been really ill for like quite a long time, and you're both really quite old. So there was that real juxtaposition of logically, I'm sure logically she didn't think he's never going to die, if you'd asked her logically. But that was how she was living. And we all do that to some extent. And that's why it's very, very rare for any of us to be touched by death, say to lose somebody, or even if it's not a physical death, it might be, say, the end of a relationship, or, suddenly developing a health problem, or it could even be a positive thing that's changed, something good that suddenly happened in your life that you weren't expecting. But, we all we're sort of like, oh my goodness, how on earth could that happen? How on earth could that happen? And yet we know that these things happen all the time. So it's very rare, going back to the death thing, it's very rare in my experience for anybody, even people that I think are very spiritually advanced actually, to experience a death and not on some level have this sense of not being able to quite believe it. Yeah, and of course this impermanence thing, different aspects of our life change at different rates. So, if you want to see change in a lump of concrete, you're going to it's going to be quite boring to sit and stare at a lump of concrete. You'll probably have to stare at it for a very, very long time before you actually sort of saw anything change. And the rate of change would be so slow that you probably wouldn't be able to see it. Whereas for other things like, our sensations, the sound of the siren as it was going down the street, our thoughts, our emotions, the weather, all of these other things that change at a very different rate. So I just want you to, I'm just going to invite you just for a minute or so, just quietly for yourself, to just reflect on a few things and to think about them over time. So firstly, I'm going to invite you to think about the street that you live in and think about aspects of that have changed over time. So that might be in terms of people, redecorating houses or building work. It could be the trees in the street losing their leaves and then getting them again in the spring. Neighbours seeing people have have a baby and then the baby grows up and then suddenly the baby's an adult and you're like, but you're only 2 years old. No, they were 2 years old like 20 years ago. You know, just think for a little minute about changes that have happened in your street over time. And also changes within your family that happen over time. And then the one that's the closest to us and the most difficult to accept is changes in yourself. So maybe physical changes as you've got older. There may have been changes that you welcomed. If you were that, scrawny, skinny kid in class that got picked on by everyone and you've kind of grown up and, become all butch and macho or something. Maybe those were changes that you welcomed. But there might be other changes that you haven't welcomed so much. There isn't really ever a point at which that stops. And yet we kind of live as if this is me and I'm just like this. So we're going to do a practice now. I'm going to lead us through it, and we're going to do a mindfulness of breathing with a particular emphasis on exploring the impermanence of our experience through the practice. And I'll kind of give us a bit of a lead through, but we will do the normal 4 stages of the mindfulness of breathing. So if you'd like to set yourself up, so we'll be sitting for about 25 minutes, so make sure you've got whatever you need to be comfortable for that. Now's the moment to grab extra cushions if you need them, or get yourself onto a chair if you prefer that. And when you're ready, just closing your eyes. And just spending the first few moments just really finding your posture. Finding the shape that you're going to take up for this practice. So one of the most central teachings of the Buddha is that impermanence is one of the 3 doorways into the real truth of reality. It's always present, impermanence. It's everywhere we look, but we just don't really see it, not deeply. So just starting by letting your awareness drop down through your body now. And seeing if you can notice how everything's changing. where you're in contact with the earth, the sensations there, the sensations of contact. Well, that's just a phrase. When you actually experience those sensations, is there anything permanent and unchanging? Or is it constantly fluctuating, even in tiny, subtle ways? And as we move into the mindfulness of breathing, I'm going to invite you to bring that lens of impermanence. I'm going to invite you to bring that to your experience of the breath in each stage. Mindfulness of breathing. Stage 1, dropping a count at the end of the out breath. And if your mind is quite still, you can notice the changingness of your experience. And if your mind is all over the place, you can notice the impermanence of that. Coming back to the breath, dropping in the count each time. Seeing if it's true in your experience that everything is impermanent. But is there really a point where it starts? Or is it just continuously moving? Stage 3, dropping all the counting, keeping as broad an awareness as you can, and just allowing the breath to emerge from that. Seeing if you can drop a little bit more intimately into the breath. And the impermanence of those sensations. Gathering your awareness around the point where the air becomes the breath becomes the air. Noticing the change there. And now dropping any effort that you're making to stay with the breath, broadening your awareness as widely as you can. And seeing if you can get a sense of the changingness of all your experience, just sitting. even if you're uncomfortable, see if you can just feel into that discomfort and notice all the different changing, fluctuating sensations that make up the discomfort. Just sitting. Seeing if you can keep that lens of noticing impermanence now as you begin to move and change position. And I invite you to take that awareness out into the tea break. And see you back here when we're going to go even more deeply and look at what's deeper and underneath impermanence when we come back after the tea break. So that's your, what do they call it? Like a trailer. Trailer for the second half. Yeah. So let's keep this room a silent space. So if you do want to stay quiet, do feel free to stay in here. But if you want to go and get a cup of tea, then please do so. Hello, I think is my mic now on? I think it's on. Hello, welcome back everybody on YouTube. Right, okay. So, in the first half we were exploring, impermanence in life, as it were, and also in our practice. And impermanence, in a way, and the theme for tonight being Prajna, this Prajna wisdom. Impermanence, or being more aware of impermanence, is a kind of a step towards that wisdom, because impermanence says that everything is always changing. But the logical conclusion to that is, if everything is always changing, then there's no such thing as a thing. Because a thing is like something that's just like that and doesn't change. So impermanence says everything is always changing, but actually all there is changingness. What we do with our sort of perceptual apparatus, with our eyes and our minds, is we look at something and we call it a thing. So I could look at that cushion, and so I'm calling that a cushion because I can't see that it's in a process of change. It will eventually rot away. So in this moment, as a shorthand, I can call it a cushion, and that's quite handy. But the actual reality, our Prajna wisdom, would be living from a place in which you're just aware of changingness. Now, what people then often go to then is like, well, how do you function in the world if if you're just aware of changingness, then you're not. So, in a way, so the Buddha was enlightened and therefore completely living from a place of changingness, but could function in the world because it's like he could tune into the way everybody else was thinking and could see that, but almost in a way could sort of see through it to the reality behind that. So it's like there's this river flowing, this ever-changing river of experience that flows underneath what we call this world of things. And it's never more kind of acutely, like I said in the first half, it's whenever that applies to ourself, it's sort of the most arresting or shocking, because of course what we call ourself is the part of the universe that we are most intimately acquainted with. But if you can imagine, you probably got this, or your parents have, or your grandparents have, photos of yourself at different ages. The cute little baby photo, and then the like cute toddler, and then the slightly awkward child, and then the even more awkward adolescent, and then the young adult, and so on and so on. I've got this one particular baby photo of me, and honestly, I've never seen such an ugly baby. I sort of looked like Winston Churchill. I was probably about 6 months old. I looked like Winston Churchill in a white dress, it's got sort of hideous christening dress thing. And I look at it, and if I look at it, and I would, in our common wording, I would say, oh yeah, that's me. That's me when I was 6 months old. But what does that actually mean, that's me? I look at this thing that, I'm no beauty queen, but I don't think I look like Winston Churchill anymore. But I look at this baby that looked like Winston Churchill, and then I go, that's me. But what, it isn't. It's a baby 50-something years ago. So what part of, how is that me? Or how is the picture of the child me, or the adolescent me, or the young adult me? Where's me in all of that? And of course there's a thread in a sense. So from a Buddhist perspective, we would say in dependence upon that baby, this adult arose. So because that baby was there looking like Winston Churchill and has now grown into this adult that's become this me here, right in this moment today. But that's the nature of the flow. That's because it's always changing, and it's us. We put this label me on top of that because, well, let's not even get into because. We just do. We just do. So there's no fixed, separate anything. There's nothing that is fixed and unchanging, including me, including you, including everything and everybody. And so being able to really deeply touch into that in your experience, and the more that we can live from that place, the more truly we are truly living in line with reality, because that is actually what's going on. And you can keep observing your own experience to see whether you agree. I'm not saying you have to believe that I'm telling the truth just because, you know, I'm an ordained Buddhist and you have to believe what I say. I'm sort of putting it to you and saying, this is the core Buddhist teaching. Look in your experience and see if you agree with that. See if you can find any part of your experience where that's not actually the case. So you can test that out for yourself. You don't need to just believe it because I'm saying it or because the Buddha said it. And the thing with this kind of teaching is sometimes it's a bit controversial to kind of give this kind of teaching to people unless they're really, you know, quite advanced or they're on a very sort of deep retreat or something. Because it can be a bit of a head trip and it can kind of make you go, oh my goodness, what, you know, then I don't exist and what's the point of anything? So I just want to temper it by saying it's not that you don't exist, it's just you don't exist in the thing, you, we, I, none of us. I don't exist in the way that I feel like I exist. I feel like I'm this separate individual fixed person until I look at these photos of myself through time. So it's not that you don't exist, it's that you don't exist in the way that you think you do. And the more we can live from a place where we are existing in line with that truth, actually my experience of times when I've touched into that is it's incredibly liberating. Incredibly liberating. It sort of sounds like it might be really depressing, like you kind of think, oh, I don't really exist in the way, you know, but my experience of touching into that is it's blissful. And my probably my strongest experience of this was on my ordination retreat. I was ordained on a 3-month-long retreat in the Spanish mountains, completely remote. There was 20-something of us, completely remote, completely off-grid, completely away from any other human beings except for each other. And sort of somewhere around the middle of the 3-month retreat, we had our actual ordination period. And some of you will know this, but probably some of you don't know this, that in our movement, when you're ordained, you have... first of all, you have your private ordination, where it's just you and the senior order member that you've chosen to be what's called your preceptor, private preceptor, who's the person who kind of mentors you towards ordination and the person that chooses your name for you, your new Buddhist name. So you have your private ordination first, and at the end of the private ordination, that's when you get told what your new name is going to be. And then for a few days after that, nobody else knows what your name is, just you and your private preceptor. And then a few days later, there's the public ordination, which is when you formally join the order, and that's the day when people's new names are announced and sort of shared with the world and put on Facebook and all the rest of it. So the symbolism of ordination, in a way, is evoking this kind of prajna wisdom. It's evoking this whole idea that there isn't this fixed self. You know, there was this person called Fiona who, but that wasn't a fixed being. You know, that being got reborn into this being called Suvarnajyoti. But in that time period between the private ordination and the public ordination, when nobody knew what my name was apart from my private preceptor, and I was there with all my friends that had been there, you know, none of us knew what any of our names were, and we were in silence, and we, you know, you're just looking around at all these people that you've been on retreat with for all this time, who you've known by this name, and you think, gosh, you know, you're not that being anymore, you're something else now. And I just found that period when I'd in a way I'd said goodbye to Fiona, but I hadn't yet really, I'd only just become Suvarnajyoti. So I didn't have this fixed self at that time. You know, I wasn't living so much from that place of fixed self during that time period. And I had so much energy, and I felt so alive and so liberated by not being weighed down by this, you know, my history and my habits and my personality and this and that and the other. It was sort of like I was able to put all that down and live from a much deeper place. And so that's been my that's been my biggest experience of touching into that sense of everything just flowing and nothing being fixed, and not being held down in that way. Okay. Okay, so I'm deliberating about whether to open up for questions, because this is the kind of stuff that obviously, as I say, it's quite a head trip and it does generate questions. But I think what I'm balancing in my mind is I really want us to have enough time to meditate with this, and to touch this experientially. So what I'm going to invite you to do is, let's just pause for a minute, and I'm just not going to say anything for a minute. I just want you to try and let that sink in, what I have said. And, you know, this is just in a way, this is our life's work. If we're on a spiritual path, is coming into relationship with this. So in a way, you can't understand it. We can't understand it intellectually. We can understand the logic of it, but actually it's got to be experienced. So I'm going to invite, if there are. So what we're going to do is we're going to do another period of the mindfulness of breathing, a slightly different version of it, but I'll lead us through that. And what I'm going to be really wanting to invite us into in that is to touch deeper and deeper into this kind of river of changingness, and to rest in the flow of that, and to see how that feels when you come out the other end, as it were, you know, what, because it's kind of beyond words. So having said all that, I do want to just offer people, if you have a kind of burning question where you're just thinking, actually I haven't got a clue what she's going on about, I can't even imagine trying to do any kind of meditation, I'm not, I really, so if you've got any kind of clarifying questions, then I'm really willing, yes. Hello, what's your name?
Hongxi.
Hongxi.
Yeah, sorry, I just have a question that the idea of not having an idea of a fixed me idea.
Yeah.
I will understand how that felt liberating in the circumstances where you try to grab all the stuff for yourself, trying to kind of gain or own something for yourself.
Yeah.
But how would that be liberating when you experience something that is gone, but you have the memory of it? You kind of miss that thing in the past, but it's not really about owning something, you just miss something that happened in the past.
Okay, so what, could you give me an example when you say...
Like, for example, I just missed the memory with my friend, I guess, from a trip in Japan, I guess.
Okay, so you were on a trip and you had a really lovely time with your friend, and you think back to that and you go, oh, that was so great.
Actually, that was a lie. Okay, so in reality, alright, so the reality is I missed the memory I had with my ex-boyfriend.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I accept what's the consequence right now and get ready to move forward, but the memory I had in the past somehow bring pain to me.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the liberating attitude towards that?
Well, I suppose it would be in a way, in a situation like that, when we've had a relationship that's caused us pain in some way, then the pain in itself is caused by us wanting something to be other than the way it really is. And the more we're able to live with it, just the ongoing flowingness of life, the less we get caught up in wanting things to be a certain way in order to make us happy. Because we're just living with the flow. So you might have a really good relationship and you can, and then that might change, and then that might change over time, and you're more able to just let that flow and be, rather than wanting it to be fixed in a happy way that isn't going to change. Because the reality is that life isn't like that. Life is constantly changing. We can never get our life absolutely perfect, because it will change. Even if it's absolutely perfect for some amount of time, it will change at some point. So if it's an unhappy memory, then in a way you can, it's liberating, because you can ride with the change of that. I don't know if does that make any sense? No, you're looking at me like it doesn't really. No. Maybe we'll talk afterwards, because I want to make sure we have enough time to try this in meditation. But it's really good to question, because it is really important to sort of it's so hard to put into words that it's good to grapple with it. So let's have a chat at the end. Okay, I'll just open in case there's anyone else who has a question. Is there anything on YouTube? No. Okay, great. Yeah, it's quite a lot to get your head round on a Wednesday night, isn't it? I think it is. Yeah. Okay, so let's do a practice. Let's do a practice. And in this, I'm going to really be inviting you to I've been talking just now in a way sort of about the theory, if you like, to give you a bit of context. But now let's really try and see if we can get a sense of it in our own experience. So so we'll be sitting again for about 25 minutes. So make sure you pick a posture that's going to be comfortable for you, and if you do need to move during it because you're not comfortable, just move slowly and mindfully and make it part of the meditation, and then that will keep your mind stiller and also be less jarring for the people around you. Okay. So when you're ready, closing your eyes. And letting your awareness drop down, trickle down through your body. It's probably been up in your head as you've been trying to think, what on earth is she going on about? So just letting it coming home to the body. And I'm going to invite you to start with a period of stage 1 of the mindfulness of breathing. So we're just going to spend a little bit of time re-stabilizing ourselves back into our physical experience. So we're going to start with mindfulness of breathing, first stage. Mindfulness of Breathing. And now staying with this third stage, just dropping in to your experience of the breath. The idea that this is not my breath. This is not me. This is not mine. There is just experience. Every time you get distracted, just notice how our mind's tendency is to go into a story with me at the center of it. And see if you can drop beneath that. Not me, not mine. Just experience flowing. As best we can, seeing if we can rest in that flow and relish. Not me, not my experience. Just relish the flow of pure experience. Constant changingness. The richness of this flow is always present to us. Not me, not mine. It's not that I hear the birds. It's just hearing the birds. Let yourself be seeing, hearing, thinking. That's what sitting is. It is the false I that interrupts the wonder with the constant desire to think about I. And all the while the wonder is occurring. The birds sing, The cars go by, the body sensations continue, the heart is beating. Life is a second by second miracle, but dreaming our I dreams, we miss it. It's not that I hear the birds. It's just hearing the birds. Life is a second by second miracle. But dreaming our I dreams, we miss it. And now for the last few moments, just checking in and seeing if you can let go any more deeply. Just completely let go of trying to stay with the breath or do anything in particular. Just sitting in open awareness, just sitting. So I hope that's given you something to reflect on through the week. Yeah, so that's a little bit of a taste or exploration of bringing this idea of Prajna wisdom, seeing beyond this fixed sense of self, and how we can bring that into the mindfulness of breathing to deepen our practice. So we're going to be carrying on our exploration of Prajna next week in relation to the Metta Bhavana. So I very much hope to see you then. Any questions, do come and say hello to me at the end, and we can have a chat. And just before I finish, just to say, everything is a flow, everything is impermanent, including the London Buddhist Centre. So if we want the London Buddhist Centre to continue to be able to offer classes to all of us and all the lovely people on YouTube, then we need to interact with our spirit of generosity. For me, that means, I give my time to teach. And for you, if you are so moved and you are in a financial position to be able to do so, we'd be very grateful if you're able to give us a donation for the class today. And for those on YouTube, Katrine's just going to put a link in the chat for you too. And then you're part of that flow of generosity. And if you're not able to give us anything or you don't wish to do so, you're every bit as welcome to be here. It's just really great to be practicing with you all. So I wish you really well for the week. Go and see impermanence and changingness everywhere. And hope to see you next week. Okay.
Thank you.
Oh yes, thank you. Very good, very good. Top marks there, gold star. Yes, if you could, if you wouldn't mind helping with the mats and the cushions, that would be excellent. Do put the cushions in brick form, otherwise they just fall over. Shall I turn the volume off, Katrine, or are we off air now anyway?